I think I'm just getting to those years. In the early years when I had Mother's Day, like you kind of need a break.
What happens when one of daytime television's most iconic talk shows faces its demise? For years, The View was more than just a talk show. It was a cultural phenomenon, a space where diverse voices collided, creating conversations that shaped headlines and challenged perspectives. But behind the camera, the story took a turn that no one expected. As whispers of cancellation began to circulate, tensions grew, and the very fabric of the show seemed to unravel. At the heart of this emotional storm was Sara Haines, a co-host beloved for her warmth, empathy, and ability to bridge divides on a panel known for its fiery debates. Today, we uncover the untold story of how The View went from being a daytime staple to the brink of cancellation, and why Sara Haynes became the emotional epicenter of it all. From backstage whispers to the tearful final broadcast, this is the story you didn't see on TV. For over 2 decades, The View wasn't just a talk show, it was a cultural force. Premiering in 1997, the program broke ground as a space where women of different generations and viewpoints could come together to discuss everything from politics to pop culture. Its roundtable format became a hallmark of candid, spirited debates that often made headlines. Audiences tuned in daily, drawn not just by the guests or the topics, but by the dynamic chemistry of its co-hosts. Each woman brought her own personality, perspective, and passion to the table. Fiery arguments, heartfelt moments, and moments of sheer hilarity turned The View into a daytime television institution. Among its standout co-hosts was Sara Haynes. Known for her sunny demeanor and thoughtful insights, Sara offered a voice of balance on a show often marked by sharp contrasts. Her ability to mediate tense moments and connect with viewers made her an essential part of the program's success. She wasn't just another panelist, she was the heart of the conversation, a presence that made even the most heated debates feel approachable. But as the years passed, even the strongest institutions faced challenges. Ratings began to waver, audience preferences shifted, and competition in the talk show space intensified. Behind the scenes, whispers of trouble started to grow, and for The View, a show that had weathered countless controversies and co-host shakeups, the question loomed: could it survive yet another storm? Little did anyone know this time would be different, and for Sara Haynes, it would become a personal and professional turning point like no other. It started as faint whispers, those kinds of rumors that seemed too absurd to take seriously. In the tightly knit world of daytime television, speculation about shows being canceled or revamped was nothing new. But when the murmurs about The View facing potential cancellation began to trickle through the studio, even the most seasoned staff brushed them off. After all, The View had survived controversies that would have sunk most shows. From viral debates to high-profile walkouts, The View had always found a way to bounce back. It was a show that thrived on drama, both on and off the air. So when the initial chatter about declining ratings and network restructuring emerged, it barely caused a ripple among the co-hosts. But as weeks went by, the whispers grew louder. Production staff began exchanging uneasy glances, and conversations behind closed doors seemed more frequent and tense. Sara Haynes, ever the optimist, tried to ignore the noise. She focused on her segments, greeted the crew with her usual warmth, and maintained her professionalism on air. Yet, even Sara couldn't shake the growing unease. Little details began to stand out. A canceled promotional campaign here, a lack of clarity about next season's plans there. Co-hosts, while smiling on camera, privately confessed their own anxieties. Some were quietly reaching out to agents, exploring backup opportunities just in case. For Sara, The View was more than just a job. It was a platform where she had grown as a broadcaster and built deep connections with the audience and her colleagues. The mere thought of losing it felt inconceivable, but as the backstage tension continued to mount, one thing became clear. This time, the rumors weren't going away, and in an industry where silence often speaks louder than words, Sara couldn't help but wonder, was the unthinkable actually happening? As rumors about The View's future began to spread, the studio environment took on an air of quiet tension. For Sara Haynes, who thrived on her connection to both her colleagues and the audience, the shift was palpable. Once a hub of energy and camaraderie, the backstage now felt subdued. An invisible weight hung over every interaction. Makeup artists and stylists, typically buzzing with lively conversation, station became unusually quiet. Production meetings, once filled with creative brainstorming, now felt more like damage control sessions. Staff members avoided eye contact when questions about the next season arose, their smiles faltering under the strain of uncertainty. Sarah couldn't help but notice these small changes, each one chipping away at the sense of stability she had come to cherish. Still, no one would give her a straight answer. When Sarah finally worked up the courage to approach a longtime producer, she was met with vague reassurances. "We're looking at all our options. Nothing is final yet." But the producer's tired expression told a different story. Sarah left the conversation with more questions than answers, her unease growing with each passing day. Privately, Sarah began to brace herself for the worst. She overheard snippets of conversations, camera operators speculating about the show's budget cuts, fellow co-hosts whispering about lining up new projects just in case. And yet, she kept her head high, performing her role with the same warmth and professionalism that viewers had come to love. But maintaining that facade wasn't easy. Between takes, Sarah would retreat to a quiet corner, scrolling through her phone or sipping her coffee, trying to push away the knot of anxiety that seemed to tighten with each passing hour. There were moments when she felt like she was standing on a sinking ship, watching the crew scramble to keep things afloat while the captain refused to acknowledge the water rising below deck. The uncertainty wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. For Sarah, The View was more than a workplace. It was a second home. It had given her a platform to grow, to connect with audiences in ways she never thought possible. To lose it now felt like losing a piece of herself, and yet, with no clear answers and no end to the rumors in sight, all she could do was wait and hope that somehow everything would work out. But deep down, Sarah knew that hope might not be enough this time. Something was shifting, and the stability she had once taken for granted was slipping through her fingers. The question wasn't if The View would change, but how much and how soon. The breaking point came quietly, as it often does in moments like these. One morning, Sarah Haynes decided she could no longer endure the silence. Armed with a mix of hope and trepidation, she approached a senior producer she had worked with for years. Sarah's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her unease as she asked the question that had been haunting her. "Is The View really on the chopping block?" The producer hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "We don't have a definitive answer yet," they began, but their tone carried an unspoken truth. With a deep sigh, they finally admitted that yes, the network was seriously considering canceling the show. Market research had painted a grim picture. Viewers were drifting toward newer, more dynamic formats on digital platforms, and sponsorship deals were beginning to waver. Sarah's heart sank as she listened. The producer attempted to soften the blow, saying, "It's not about you or anyone else personally. It's just times are changing." But the words offered little comfort. To Sarah, The View wasn't just a show. It was a space for meaningful dialogue, a platform where differing perspectives could coexist and even clash in productive ways. How could something so vital be deemed irrelevant? In the days that followed, the confirmation spread like wildfire through the studio. Staff members began to piece together the puzzle of what had been happening behind the scenes. The canceled promotions, the vague memos, the lack of clarity about future plans. It all pointed to one undeniable conclusion. The View was in its final chapter. For Sarah, the news hit harder than she expected. She had poured so much of herself into the show, and now it felt as though a part of her identity was being ripped away. Between filming segments, she found herself retreating to quiet corners of the set, tears brimming as she scrolled through messages on her phone or stared at the familiar surroundings. The circular table, the bright studio lights, the cameras, they had been constants in her life, and now they felt like fleeting memories. Even as her co-hosts began making contingency plans and exploring new opportunities, Sarah struggled to imagine a life beyond The View. She wasn't just mourning the loss of a job, she was mourning the loss of a community, a platform, and a purpose that had defined her for years. Still, Sarah maintained her professionalism on camera. She smiled, laughed, and engaged with guests as though nothing had changed. But off camera, her heart was heavy and her mind was racing with questions. What would come next? Could she ever find a space as meaningful as this one? And most painfully, had she done enough to help the show survive? The moment of truth had arrived, and it left Sarah and everyone else grappling with an uncertain future. The show wasn't gone yet, but the clock was ticking and the end felt closer than ever. As the reality of The View's cancellation set in, the studio atmosphere shifted from tense uncertainty to quiet resignation. The once bustling backstage, filled with energy and camaraderie, now felt like a solemn waiting room. Each day brought Sara Haines closer to an ending she wasn't ready to face, and every familiar routine took on a bittersweet significance. Production meetings became shorter and more perfunctory, their focus less on creativity and more on wrapping up loose ends. Staff members who once laughed and chatted during breaks now exchanged solemn glances, avoiding the subject everyone knew was on their minds. Even the vibrant studio lighting, which once felt energizing, now seemed to cast an almost harsh spotlight on a team grappling with an uncertain future. Sarah, ever the optimist, tried to maintain her composure, but cracks began to show. Between segments, she would retreat to a quiet corner or her dressing room, struggling to hold back tears. On more than one occasion, a crew member found her staring at the iconic circular table, running her fingers along its surface as if trying to memorize its texture. To Sarah, it wasn't just furniture. It was a symbol of the countless hours she had spent debating, laughing, and learning in front of millions of viewers. Despite the emotional weight, Sarah made it a point to express gratitude to those around her. She began writing heartfelt thank you notes to crew members, camera operators, makeup artists, lighting technicians, acknowledging their contributions to the show's success. These small gestures became her way of coping, a means of ensuring that no matter how things ended, everyone felt appreciated. As rumors of a grand finale began circulating, opinions among the cast and crew were divided. Some wanted a celebratory send-off with tributes, montages, and special guests. Others, Sarah included, felt torn. While she understood the importance of honoring the show's legacy, she worried that such a spectacle might feel hollow, a forced attempt to mask the heartbreak of its ending. The final week of filming was an emotional whirlwind. Longtime staffers lingered in hallways, reminiscing about the show's golden moments. Co-hosts who had once clashed over on-air debates now shared quiet moments of solidarity, their disagreements replaced by mutual respect for what they had built together. Sarah found solace in these connections, even as each day brought the inevitable closer. On the morning of the final broadcast, Sarah arrived earlier than usual. She walked onto the set while it was still dimly lit, taking in the sight of the empty chairs and silent cameras. She sat at the table, tracing its edge with her hand and letting the memories wash over her. It was a moment of private mourning for a chapter of her life that was about to close. The final episode itself was a masterclass in bittersweet emotions. Co-hosts shared their favorite memories, thanked the audience, and reflected on the show's impact. Sarah, ever poised, delivered a heartfelt tribute, her voice wavering only slightly as she thanked the viewers, the crew, and her fellow co-hosts for the journey. Her eyes glistened with tears, but she managed a warm smile, determined to end on a note of gratitude. When the cameras cut for the last time, the studio erupted in applause, less a celebratory cheer and more a collective expression of appreciation and goodbye. Sarah, unable to hold back any longer, let her tears flow as her co-hosts and the crew gathered for a final group hug. In that moment, all the walls of professionalism dissolved, leaving only a group of people mourning the end of something they had built together. As the lights dimmed and the set was dismantled, Sarah left behind one final gesture, a stack of thank you notes carefully placed around the studio. Each one was a testament to the connections and memories that had made The View so much more than a show. It was a family. The final days were over, but for Sara Haines, the story wasn't. It was only the beginning of a new chapter, one she wasn't yet ready to write, but knew she would face with the same heart and determination that had endeared her to millions. The day of The View's final broadcast arrived like a quiet storm, somber yet charged with emotion. For Sara Haines, it felt surreal. The morning began with an eerie stillness in the studio. Crew members moved about with hushed tones, their faces a mix of sadness and determination to make the last episode unforgettable. Even the familiar hum of the cameras warming up seemed muted, as if the equipment too was mourning the end. Sarah arrived earlier than usual, seeking a few moments alone to process the gravity of the day. She walked onto the empty set, her footsteps echoing in the quiet space. Sitting at the iconic circular table, she ran her fingers along its edge, reflecting on the years she had spent here, laughing, debating, and connecting with millions of viewers. This table wasn't just furniture, it was the heart of the show, a symbol of the conversations that had defined her career. When the broadcast began, the mood was bittersweet. The co-hosts, who had spent years sparring and laughing together, put on their brightest smiles for the cameras. Each segment carried a weight it never had before, as if everyone knew they were writing the final chapter of of a legacy. Special guests, emotional tributes, and a montage of the show's most iconic moments filled the episode, offering viewers a chance to reminisce while the cast tried to keep their emotions in check. For Sarah, each moment felt both fleeting and eternal. She participated with her usual warmth, but her voice occasionally wavered and her eyes glistened with unshed tears. When it came time for each co-host to share their reflections, Sarah's words were heartfelt and raw. She spoke about how The View had shaped her both personally and professionally, giving her a platform to engage in meaningful conversations and connect with a diverse audience. "This isn't just a goodbye to a show," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "It's a goodbye to a family, to a place where so many of us found our voices and learned to truly listen to others. I'm endlessly grateful to have been a part of this." Her words were met with applause from both the studio audience and her fellow co-hosts, many of whom wiped away their own tears. As the final segment drew to a close, the co-hosts gathered for an impromptu moment of solidarity. Holding hands, they thanked the audience for their unwavering support and shared their hopes for the future of meaningful conversations in media. When the cameras cut for the last time, the applause was deafening, an outpouring of love and gratitude from the audience, the crew, and everyone who had been part of The View's journey. Sarah couldn't hold back her tears any longer. They flowed freely as her co-hosts pulled her into a tight group hug, joined by members of the production team who had worked tirelessly behind the scenes. It was a moment of shared grief and appreciation, a collective acknowledgement of what they had built together. After the broadcast ended, the studio emptied slowly. Staff members lingered, snapping photos, exchanging hugs, and packing up their belongings. Sarah, always thoughtful, had left thank you notes for every department: camera operators, lighting technicians, makeup artists, and more. Each note was a personal expression of gratitude, a small but heartfelt gesture that encapsulated her appreciation for the people who had made the show possible. As Sarah walked out of the studio for the last time, she turned back for one final look. The bright lights had dimmed, the circular table sat empty, and the set was eerily quiet. It was the end of an era, but in her heart, she knew the conversations, the connections, and the lessons of The View would live on. The last broadcast wasn't just the closing of a show, it was the celebration of a legacy and a testament to the power of meaningful dialogue. And for Sarah, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, one shaped by the lessons and memories of a journey she would carry with her forever. In the days and weeks following The View's cancellation, the ripples of its end extended far beyond the studio walls. For fans, the show's abrupt conclusion was both shocking and heartbreaking. Social media became flooded with tributes, hashtags like #SaveTheView trending as viewers shared memories of how the show had impacted their lives. Posts praising Sara Haines were especially prominent, with fans lauding her warmth, balance, and ability to bring levity to even the most contentious discussions. But for Sarah, the fallout was deeply personal. The end of The View was not just the loss of a job, but the loss of a community and a sense of purpose that had defined her professional life. Paparazzi snapped photos of her running errands, often captioned with phrases like "Sara Haynes still coping after The View's shocking end." The public scrutiny only added to her emotional burden as she grappled with her own feelings of loss and the pressure to move forward. The media also dissected the cancellation from every angle. Some blamed the network for failing to adapt to shifting audience preferences, while others pointed to the oversaturation of daytime talk shows. Analysts debated whether The View's decline was due to its increasingly polarized content or simply a reflection of broader changes in media consumption. Whatever the reason, one fact was clear: the landscape of daytime television had changed, and The View's departure marked the end of an era. Meanwhile, Sarah struggled to reconcile her public persona with her private grief. She kept a low profile, spending time with her family and reflecting on her next steps. Offers began to pour in. Other networks and production companies saw her as a valuable on-air presence, but Sarah was hesitant to jump into something new. The heartbreak of losing The View was still fresh, and she needed time to process. During this period of reflection, Sarah found solace in small, meaningful moments. She looked through old photos and clips from the show, allowing herself to feel the full weight of what she had been a part of. She also maintained connections with her former co-hosts and crew members, finding comfort in shared memories and mutual support. Fans Fans too played a role in helping her heal. Messages of gratitude poured in, with viewers sharing stories of how Sarah's presence on The View had touched their lives. These reminders of the show's impact reassured her that its legacy would endure, even if the cameras were no longer rolling. Despite the sadness, Sarah began to feel a flicker of hope. While The View had been a significant chapter in her life, it wasn't the whole story. She knew she still had much to offer as a broadcaster and a storyteller. In time, she started exploring ideas for new projects, platforms where she could continue fostering meaningful conversations and connecting with audiences. The cancellation of The View had been a seismic shift, not just for Sarah, but for the world of daytime television. But even as the dust settled, it became clear that the values the show championed, diverse perspectives, spirited debate, and human connection, were far from obsolete. And for Sarah Haynes, those values would guide her as she looked ahead to whatever came next. Because while the lights on The View had dimmed, the conversations it sparked were far from over. And Sarah, as always, was ready to keep the dialogue alive. As the dust settled after The View's cancellation, Sarah Haynes found herself at a crossroads. For years, the show had been her platform, her community, and her passion. Its absence left a void that was both intimidating and liberating. With no immediate projects lined up, Sarah decided to take a step back and reevaluate her next move, determined not to rush into something that didn't align with her values. In the weeks following the final broadcast, Sarah spent time reflecting on what The View had meant to her. It wasn't just a job, it was a mission. The show had given her the opportunity to foster dialogue, connect with people from all walks of life, and tackle issues that mattered. She knew that whatever came next had to honor those principles. Offers from other networks and media companies came quickly, but Sarah was deliberate in her responses. She wasn't interested in joining just any project. Instead, she began exploring ideas for creating her own platform, something that could merge the thought-provoking discussions of The View with modern digital-first formats. Whether it was a podcast, a web series, or even a new talk show, Sarah was excited by the prospect of shaping a space where authentic, diverse voices could thrive. While Sarah's professional life was in flux, she leaned heavily on her personal life for support. Quiet evenings with her family, walks in the park, and moments of gratitude helped her regain her footing. She found inspiration in her children, who reminded her of the importance of resilience and moving forward. Sarah also used this time to reconnect with her audience in new ways. She became more active on social media, sharing personal reflections and engaging with fans who had supported her throughout her journey. This direct interaction not only reignited her passion for connecting with people, but also helped her test ideas for her next venture. Though the pain of losing The View lingered, Sarah began to see the end of the show as a new beginning. The lessons she had learned about empathy, balance, and the power of dialogue would guide her as she charted her path forward. She envisioned a future where she could use her voice to spark conversations that mattered, just as she had done for so many years. In a candid interview with a respected journalist, Sarah summed up her perspective. "Endings are never easy, but they remind us of what we care about most. The View taught me the value of listening, learning, and growing, and I'm ready to carry that forward into whatever comes next." For Sarah Haynes, The View wasn't just a chapter, it was the foundation for a future filled with possibility. And while the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear: Sarah's voice and her commitment to meaningful conversation would continue to resonate with audiences for years to come. The cancellation of The View marked the end of an era, not just for daytime television, but for the countless viewers who turned to it for insight, debate, and connection. For Sarah Haynes, it was a deeply personal loss, yet also an opportunity to reflect on what the show had meant to her and the millions it reached. Through the uncertainty, the rumors, and the bittersweet final broadcast, Sarah's journey was one of resilience and authenticity. She wasn't just a co-host, she was a bridge between perspectives, a voice of empathy in a world often divided. Her emotional farewell and heartfelt tributes reminded everyone of the show's core mission: to bring people together even in disagreement. While the lights of The View have dimmed, its legacy lives on, carried by the stories, conversations, and memories it left behind. For Sarah, it was a turning point, a chance to redefine her purpose and create new opportunities to inspire and connect. As she steps into the next chapter, Sarah Haynes carries with her the values and lessons that made her an integral part of The View's success. The platform may have changed, but her voice remains as strong as ever, ready to spark the conversations that matter. In the end, endings are not just about loss, they're about reflection and renewal. And for Sarah Haynes, this is only the beginning of what promises to be an even more meaningful journey. The conversation, as she has shown us, is far from over.